The date today is September 21st, 2013. The location is the home of James DuBois in West Bloomfield, Michigan. The time is about 1:10 p.m. Today the person being interviewed is James Walter DuBois, birth date March 9th, 1925. Jim served in World War II as a PFC Army Infantry Rifleman for the 28th Division, 112th Regiment, 1st Battalion, Company C. This interview will be conducted by Louise Schmaltz. And the interview is being conducted on behalf of the Oral History Project and will become part of the collections at the Yankee Air Museum in Belleville, Michigan. It will also be shared with the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. So let's start by, how about telling me a little bit about your family and where you went to high school?
Well, I was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin, home of the Packers, and I went to grammar school, high school there, graduated from West High School, 1943. I had one brother. My father, he owned his own dealership for a while, and then during the Depression, he just worked as a salesman, selling cars. And everything was okay until 1943 when I was drafted, and changed my life.
Do you recall how you felt at the time when you got your draft notice?
I actually was kind of positive about it. All my friends were going off to war. So in June of 43, or July, I went to Milwaukee for my physical, and I'm almost blind in my left eye, so I couldn't pass the eye exam, so they classified me as 4F. So I went back home again, and I worked in a couple of different jobs, and then I think it was in September that they called me up again. I went back to Wisconsin, to Milwaukee, and this time I kind of half memorized the eye chart, so I was accepted for limited service, and on my draft papers it said no combat, limited service because of eyesight. And then I took my Army General Classification test, and because I got a fairly high score in it, I was put in what they call the ASTP program, Army Specialized Training Program, and I was sent off to Fort Benning, Georgia. I remember when I got in the barracks, I was about the only high school kid there. All the other guys were from college. And we had basic training, lasted about 13 weeks. And then I was notified that I would be going to the University of Minnesota. And as soon as we finished our training, and a couple of weeks later, they canceled the program out. And I was shipped off to Fort Jackson, and with the 87th Division, and there I went through another basic training, and they hadn't really. There was some talk that they were going to send us over to Europe, but we weren't shipped out. And then I broke my finger, and in an exercise where we were wrestling, and some guy stepped on my finger with a combat boot and broke it. So then I went to they had told me to go to the dispensary, and then they had me going in there every morning for therapy for my finger, and I had a splint on it. And so I think the sergeant wasn't very happy about that. And so a few weeks later, they had a call up. They needed some people to fill the ranks over in Europe, and they needed some people sent over as replacements. And so, of course, I was the first one on the sergeant's list because he kind of figured I was dogging it, I guess. So I was sent off to Baltimore and put on a troop ship to Mauritania and sent to Europe. And of course, the trip ship was pretty crowded. I think there were 8 of us bunked, one on top of the other. I think I was on the top bunk. And the food, you know, was British food, and we had a lot of mutton, and I ate mutton. So I don't think I ate anything but candy bars for the whole trip. So anyway, 7 days later, we landed in England, and they sent us off to a training area where we slept in tents, and a lot of forced marches, a lot of more training for infantry. And it must have been about 2 or 3 weeks we were there, and then they sent us off to the northern part of England, and where there was a troop ship, landing ship, and we were loaded on that and went over to Normandy Beach. And of course, there was no fighting at that time, so we landed there and got to the top of the cliff, and we spent the night there, just sleeping on the ground with a tarp over us because it was pouring rain. And the next morning they put us on trucks, and we went off towards Germany. Went through Paris, and then kept going, and finally we stopped and disembarked, I'd say about 10 miles from the front lines, and we all hiked up to what they call the Herkton Forest. And the Herkton Forest was a real failure on the part of the American troops. The generals really kind of fouled it up when they went into the Herkton Forest, because we went in there, they went in there, and they had a lot of foxholes dug, but the Germans had shot artillery shells off with proximity fuses, and those fuses were set so that they exploded above the tree line. So we lost thousands of soldiers in the Herkton Forest. In fact, I just read in the paper about a week or two ago that one of the farmers in Germany was out in the Herkton Forest and found a skeleton of a GI propped up against a tree. And it had been sitting there all those years. So we were waiting to go into the forest, and then they decided that the 28th Division was just too decimated. And so they thought they would, because they had too many replacements, so they loaded us on trucks and they sent us off to Luxembourg, and for further training, you know, and to acclimate all the new guys. So we were there in Luxembourg, and then for a while, I'd say for 2 or 3 weeks, we'd go out in foxholes every night and be sort of the first line of defense in case the Germans would decide to do something. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks of that, they brought up another group, and we were sent in the rear, and we just made contact with the division on our left flank. And so that went on for a few weeks. And then when I came back on December 16th, after having made contact with the 105th Division on our right flank, I went back into my foxhole, and that must have been 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd say around 5 or 6, all of a sudden the artillery started up, and they have what we call a rolling barrage. You could hear all the artillery shells dropping and getting closer and closer to us, but then when it got to our division flank, it just stopped and went back the other way. So they must have known exactly where they were, and they pretty well decimated the 105th Division. In fact, that entire division surrendered, and it's still a kind of a puzzle why they did that, why the general did that. But they all surrendered to the Germans on December 16th or 17th. And we, of course, we had some minor incursions with Germans, but most of them were going around behind us. And as they were going up the hill behind us, we were lying there, at least I and my buddy, and they were climbing the hill behind us, and one of the lieutenants came up and said, don't shoot, don't fire at these guys. So we didn't fire, and we stood up. No sooner did we stood up, and a mortar shell came in. I dove to the right, he dove to the left, and I just got a minor flesh wound, but he was pretty badly wounded. I had to take him out, and he had just gotten back from the hospital, and he went back again. And then after that, we started to retreat, and we went from one location to the next, just kept going, and then some armored columns met up with us, and we were all going back toward France to try to regroup. And then after about 4 or 5 days of that, the lieutenant was standing alongside the road, and he was on a truck, and he said, get in this truck, and so we all got back in another truck. We had a number of them. We headed off, not retreating, going back toward France, but we were going back towards Germany again. So we went as far as we could go, and they loaded us, and then we walked back. We walked past a line of tanks, and when I saw the tanks, that was the last force between us and the Germans. So we wound up in the Hürtgen Forest, and I was there 2 or 3 days, and I think they were trying to decide what to do, and they finally decided to take the 28th Division and move it to Luxembourg to regroup and retrain. And so they put us on trucks, and we wound up in Luxembourg. And so that's how I happened to get in Luxembourg, and then going back to the Battle of the Bulge. After we were retreating, we went. There was another battle. They called it the Eggshell. In the Battle of the Bulge, they had what they called an eggshell, a defensive area, and we were there. And that's when the Germans attacked us, and my squad leader said, because there were just probably 100 guys just kind of milling around, and he said, let's get out of here. And so he had a compass, and we started following him and trying to get back to our lines again. And after about 3 days of wandering around and trying to get back, we were spotted from a church tower, and as we came out of a wooded area, there was probably 50 to 20 German soldiers there with their machine guns trained on us. And so the squad leader threw his rifle down, and I was the last one in the column, and I decided I didn't want to be a hero, and so I threw mine down, and I was captured. All of us were captured. And then we were sent. We were kept in one location near that area for a while, for a day or two. Then we started marching back into Germany, and we got back to a town called Gerolstein, and Gerolstein had all these prisoners of war, and this factory used to be an old pickle factory, and the food was pretty scarce. They gave us some kind of soup, I think it was a barley soup or something like that, once a day or twice a day. And guys were pretty sick, guys were dying. A friend of mine, I'm not sure now if he was a friend or acquaintance or what he was, but he was sitting there and you could tell he was in trouble, and I put my arm around him and tried to give him something to eat, and he died in my arms. And the guys are dying, and there was no medical attention at all. So after, I'd say probably a couple of weeks in Geraldstein, they put us on boxcars and gave us each little piece of salami or a little piece of meat, and locked the doors. And there's probably about 40 of us in each boxcar, and there was no food other than that, no water, and the train was start and stop, and if there was any planes around, it would stop, and then it would start up again. And I remember reaching out, there was a little opening on the top, trying to get some icicles so I could have a little bit of water. And we traveled probably several days, and then we got up the trains and we marched into Bonn, Germany, where they had a prisoner of war camp. And unfortunately, when I was walking along the way, I got very thirsty. This was a couple of days before that. And I took some water out of a stream. And I guess it was contaminated, because when we got to Bonn, Germany, I had a very high fever. And they had one area where they had a little building with about 20 or 25 or 30 GIs that were sick or wounded, and with a high fever. And I found out later that I had hepatitis. I wasn't able to keep anything on my stomach, so I couldn't eat anything, and I was just kind of wasting away. And then one night, the British planes came over and firebombed that camp, and the flares fell right on top of the little building where all the sick guys were, and started on fire. And then we were running outside, and we were standing in the snow, and all of a sudden I decided I better go back in and get my shoes, my boots. And I ran back in, and the beams were falling down. And I managed to get my boots and run back outside again. And then, because a lot of us are pretty sick, they were hauling us off to a lot of people off to a monastery called Sigburg. And I was pretty sick, and they hauled out 3 or 4 or 5 ambulances with guys in them, but I was still there yet. So I went up to the doctor, and I said, "You got to get me out of here. I'm not going to make it another day." And he put me on the last ambulance and stuck me on some way, and got over to Sigburg. And when we got there, there was a GI, they call him Moose, a big guy. I think I didn't weigh very much. So he just picked me up and carried me in. And there they gave us all showers. And because it was a monastery, a Catholic monastery, there were a lot of nuns there. And the nuns brought us out some milk. Each had a glass of milk, a big pitcher of milk for everybody. And that's the first time I was able to keep anything on my stomach without vomiting. And then when we got into a room where I had all the American prisoners that were wounded or sick, put us in bed. And then they had a French, like he was a medic. And because I had a French name, he took a particular interest in me, and he got me what he called a regime diet. And he got me some sulfa, and I gradually started to recover. And I kind of attribute the fact that I made it to the fact that I was a French, actually I found out later he was a priest, French priest, had medical training, and myself. And I guess we were there about, must have been there about at least 2 weeks, maybe one a little bit more. And then you could hear the artillery shells coming in on Bonn, Germany, and getting pretty close to this monastery. And some were landing just outside of it, and the glass, you know, they had big windows, and they were all shattered, and the glass was coming down. So I guess they decided we better get out of there. And they put us on, some guys that were ambulatory, were able to walk. They put them in a column and marched them out somewhere, going back into the interior part of Germany. And I and 3 or 4 guys that they decided were too sick to make that walk, they put us on ambulances, and German ambulances, and they took us back into the interior of Germany and wound up at a town called Würzburg. It's not the big Würzburg, it's a small one. And it's, I'm not quite, I'd have to find it on the map, but I think I still could find where it is. And so that's where we were. And they had some barracks there, and some of us were put in this one barracks. We were right by a railroad track, and every day the fighters would come across and strafe the railroad yards that were just on the other side, and we'd be diving down about to try to avoid the strafing, because we was afraid that some of the bullets would come through the roof of the barracks. And then after a couple of 3 weeks of that, they had it was getting a little warmer then. It must have been March, and the weather was breaking a little bit. So I got out and was able to walk around a little, and there was a big encampment of Russians prisoners of war. And I remember they had butchered a horse, and they were cooking a horse, and had a big, probably 20 gallon, 30 gallon or more kettle-like, and they were cooking the horse, and I tried to eat some of the horse meat, but I think maybe. And on the other side, we had a whole contingent of Italian people that were working in some of the factories around there. There was slave laborers, I guess. And then they had a big latrine, or a slip trench hooked up in the middle. So if you had to go to the bathroom, I remember going to the bathroom one day, and I sat down, and next thing I knew, it was a German girl, not a Russian girl, came and sat right alongside of me and started talking to me. It was kind of embarrassing. And then after that, I guess one day led to the next, and then sometime in April, the American soldiers came pretty close. All of a sudden, I was out walking around, a GI came, a scout came running down, and he just ignored me, and he ran from one point to the next. It was right by the Catholic church was right there. And he got down about 20, 30 yards from me, and he got hit by a mortar shell, and I looked like he was killed. So even though there wasn't much going on, people are still getting killed. And then tanks came up, and they advanced, and they put all of us, there weren't that many of us right there, but put us in trucks and took us to a camp called Camp Lucky Strike. Camp Lucky Strike is where they processed all the prisoners of war, gave us a shower. First time we had a shower in quite a while. And before we took the shower course, they had us lined up, and we went through they had DDT in a big vat right above us. They pulled a cord, you'd be drenched in DDT to get rid of the bugs. I didn't talk about the bugs, but bed bugs and lice and all that stuff. It was just terrible. And then we took a shower, and then they loaded us up on on trucks and took us to Paris. And I was in Paris for a while. And got pretty ambulatory. I was able to walk around Paris. And then after a while, put us on a train and we went back toward, we didn't go too far because of the airfield that they put us on. They put us on a plane and took us over to England. And they had a hospital, field hospital in England. I was there. And I was recovering pretty good until I got gastroenteritis. Didn't know what I had. I guess it was food poisoning or something. And my stomach got swollen up like a balloon. And all the nurses would come in to see the pregnant GI. We were joking about it. I never saw a GI that was pregnant before. And of course, it was kind of funny, I guess, the way. But after a while there, they put us on a train and took us up to Scotland, and loaded us on a plane, and took us back to America. We landed in Iceland. That's the first time I had fresh eggs since I left the States. Then we landed in Newfoundland and then in New York, and I was put in the hospital in New York for a while, and they transferred me to a hospital in Chicago, and then I spent some time there. Then I went to a hospital in Missouri, and had 2 operations on my left eye to try to fix up my vision difficulties. And then I went on an extended furlough at home, and then I was discharged. That was the end of my time as an American soldier.
And after your discharge, I saw some newspaper pictures and articles that Uncle Sam bought you a little vacation to have with your parents.
That's right, yeah. I went in Chicago because I was in a hospital in Chicago. They gave us 3 or 4 days. I don't think it was a full week in a hotel in downtown Chicago. And then, of course, the newspapers got into that, and they even took pictures of us.
Yeah, that was a good little story.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had any training, in basic training, for helping you deal with when you were a prisoner of war?
Not really.
Was there a point at which the Germans did a lot of interrogating?
No, I think no, not really. There were just too many of us. They captured a lot of people in the Battle of Bellows.
Right. So tell me about just before you were captured, when you were your squad was being led around by the sergeant. Just how did your group? What was your strategy for trying to get back to the lines?
Well, as I said before, he had a compass and he knew what direction to go. And we decided that we'd only travel by night. So we would be in the woods, and one night in the woods, a dog started barking, and we were kind of worried about it because, well, probably 20 yards, there was a roadway, and there was a lot of Germans and German military. You could hear the tanks, and we were afraid they would notice us. So, but they finally cleared out, and then we went on our way. But after 3 days of wandering in the woods, not wandering, he was actually had a plan, and we were getting pretty close probably. But then because we hadn't eaten in 3 days, even had any water, he decided we better start traveling in daylight, during the daylight hours. And we came out of this one woods, and unfortunately they had some spotters in the church tower, and they saw us. And about 20 of them, we came out of the woods, were standing there with their machine guns aimed at us. And so the sergeant laid down his rifle, and I was the last one in line, and I decided that would be the prudent thing to do. So I dropped down my rifle, and my days as a prisoner of war began.
When you were taken to the first work camp, was that the location near Prüm?
Yeah,
Germany?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how did they take you there?
We just walked there.
You marched there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it a long march?
I probably took a couple of days. Yeah, it was I don't know the exact distance, but it was a ways, yeah.
And how were you being treated?
And from Germany, it was we were all they had us in a there was a school. I think it was a religious school, and they had us on the top floor, and they got us out one morning to work on the railroad, and we were all standing on a bridge, and the British planes are circling right above us, and the guard said, "Take your blankets." Some of the guys had blankets and wave them, so they know you're prisoners of war. So some guys are standing there waving their blankets. And I was kind of skeptical of the whole thing. I kind of moved over to the side of the bridge, but sitting on the concrete railing. And when I saw one of the Spitfires nose down, I just jumped in the water. And the water was, because it was middle of winter, the water was quite deep. It was up to my neck. And I kind of got underneath the bridge as best I could. And then they started firing. I could hear the firing taking place above me. And I didn't hear any noise other than the firing. I didn't hear any screaming or anything. And then one of the German guards jumped in the water alongside of me, and he had a wound, and he was bleeding pretty badly, and the water was getting pretty clouded with blood. And anyway, after a while, and then some of the guys were running across the field. I think a turnip field, I believe, and the British planes were following them and strafing them right in the field, killing them. So they killed 4 or 5 guys trying to run away from them. So after it all quieted down, I got back up on the bridge, and other guys that I'd gotten to know a little bit were lying there dead, pretty bad. You could tell they're badly wounded. And one guy that I was talking to just before that, a tall fellow, he must have been 6'5", and he said he's living in New England, and when he got back home again, he was going to run for mayor. And ran up to him, and he got hit right in the heart, and the whole one side of his body was gone. So it wasn't a very pretty sight. And then I got back into the school, and on the lower floor they were baking bread, and I almost tried to steal some bread, but I thought, well, they'll probably shoot me. So then we went upstairs, and I spent the night in wet clothing. And in the morning, looked like a German SS guy, lieutenant. He was all dressed, he had a black uniform on. And he said, "That's Rouse. You want me to go out outside on a detail, on a work detail?" And I said, "No, I'm just too wet." And he said, and he decided, yeah, I should go. And he pulled his Luger out, and he cocked it and put it by my temple, and he said, "Rouse." I said, "Yes, I'll go." And so I went outside, and they gave me a wheelbarrow, and they had stored some of the bodies in the shed. And there was 2 of us, and we picked the bodies up and put them in the wheelbarrow. At least one on each trip, and took them to a burial site, which is maybe 50 yards away, and laid them down, and went back, got some more bodies. And then the guys that were digging the grave, like a big long slit trench, They wanted us, one of the guys we brought back had a gold wedding ring on his finger. And he held up his hand, dead GI, and handed me his knife and said he wanted me to cut the finger off so I could remove the big old ring. And I said, no, 9. And so they didn't do anything. And they kept throwing the bodies into the slip trench. They were piled up. They kind of, because I was born and raised a Catholic, and they always told you, you know, you're supposed to be buried in a Catholic cemetery by a priest and all that stuff. And you ever throw guys in the grave that were probably Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, whatever, who knows what they were, one on top of the other. So you kind of change your attitude about a lot of things. And at any rate, after that all happened, they got us back on trains again somehow or another, just a little foggy. But then we went to, that's where we went back to Bonn, Germany. Put us on trains. But anyway, it was, I think that was the most horrific thing I experienced. I saw guys killed in combat, but never anything where friendly fire killed so many people. Later on here, maybe a year or two ago, when we had visited Germany, I got went to that school where this had happened, and I tried to recognize where we buried all those people, but they had built some houses there, and I wasn't quite sure. But anyway, I sent a letter off to, I think it's Hawaii, where they have this graves registration thing. But I never heard from them. I sent pictures, we had taken photographs. I tried to point out exactly where that grave site was, but I never heard anything. So I'm not sure if they might have been disinterred long before that, I don't know. But that's the way it goes.
When you were transferred from camp to camp, was it always by train?
No. At first it was just walking.
Uh-huh.
Just walking.
Was it marching in the daytime?
Yeah.
Did you run into any civilians while you were...
Oh yeah, they went through, had to walk through one little village, and all the women were looking out the windows, the German women, and spitting on us and stuff like that. Which you can imagine, there's not much love lost at that time. But
And what kind of food were they providing for you?
not very much.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm trying to think right now. I don't remember them giving us very much food at all. They might have just given us some crackers or something. But and then when we got to Gerolstein, it was just some kind of a tea that they gave us every day.
Not much food at all.
No.
So
well,
what,
when I was liberated, I weighed 110 pounds.
that's what I was going to ask you. And how much did you weigh before, like
165.
165?
Yeah.
And you were a prisoner essentially just the winter, one season.
Yeah.
When you were in the cattle cars one time being transported to Bonn, I understand it was crowded and they gave you very little food and water and you were eating the icicles.
Yeah.
Was it cold also?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so cold that in order to keep my feet from freezing, I take my boots off, combat boots off, and massage my toes. I think I got one toe that's pretty bad. I'm only part of the toe, but I think I saved the most of them by doing that, by massaging them almost all day long. I just kept massaging them, try to get the blood to circulate.
There was nothing else to do in the cattle car. And occasionally the train was strafed by the British?
Yes, I'm not sure who was strafing it, but
Uh-huh.
it could have been Americans. But yeah, and the train only traveled we didn't travel very far, maybe only 40 miles or so, but they only would travel at nighttime for fear of being strafed.
And during the day they were just pulled into some
Yeah.
obscure location?
Yeah, they'd take us out from time to time and line us up. And the only thing I noticed is that when they did take us out of the cars, line us up, you could look down and you saw all the bodies of dead GIs piled up and behind the caboose like logs of timber or something. And
That's individuals who had died in the train?
and when they stopped the train, they'd go through the cars and take out the dead guys and just put them, just stack them up at the front of just behind the engine. So.
Were you traveling with the same squad of guys you were captured with by this time?
Yeah, pretty much. No, they were all pretty much with us, yeah. But it was getting kind of confusing then. When we got to Geraldstein, they were still with us, yeah, still with me. But I know when I got to Bonn, Germany, and I was running a high fever and I was getting a little delirious, the sergeant was one that had me taken to the little hospital where they were trying to treat me.
Is that where you ran into the American doctor?
Yeah.
And he worked with doing the best he could for you?
Yes, he did, yeah.
I think at one point you were telling me, or maybe I'd read in one of the manuscripts that there was at some point a German soldier hit you in the back between the shoulder blades.
And there was at Geraldstein. I went out to go to the latrine, and one of the guards came out and he threw a bone with some meat on it on the ground. Of course, I'm half starved to death, so I naturally kind of reached down to pick it up, and he came up behind me and hit me in the back of the head with a rifle butt. They didn't even want you to even have a scrap of food.
Even that you could scrounge.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you sustain an injury from that kind of treatment?
I'm not. I don't think so. I might have had a little problem in my neck, but nothing that serious.
Was this the American doctor that you ran into in Bonn? Was he the one that visited you later in Paris?
Yeah.
And was at some point he told you he didn't think you were going to survive. Was that when he saw you in Paris?
That's about it. He said, number one, he said, I didn't know how in the world you could have been drafted. He said, but now I see you're a pretty big guy. But yeah, he said, when I put you on that ambulance, I didn't think you were going to make it. So I attribute the fact that I did to that French priest. I think he was French, and he got me some antibiotics.
Oh, was that in Bonn or?
Yeah.
Wow. So you ran into some kindness from some of the other prisoners.
Yeah.
You all did the best you could to stick together and help each other.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pause here just a minute. So, after the war, what did you do about getting back into a career?
I went to the University of Wisconsin and graduated, and in marketing. And jobs in Madison at that time were kind of scarce. And I went off to Chicago, and I got a job working at one of the banks, Continental Bank, I think it was. And then they had me go in for a physical. And at that time I was having some allergy problems, and I mentioned it to the to the doctor that I had, some allergy problems, and, which I should not have done. And when he sent it back over to the employment office at the bank, if you got any kind of allergy, they don't like people who are afraid might handle money. I guess there have been some people who have quit, because they're allergic to handling money or this or that, I think. So I was called in after about 2 weeks and fired. So, because of my allergies. So then I happened to see, in the Yellow Pages, a company called Monroe Calculating Machine Company. And the only reason I happened to see that is because my dad had a business and there was a Monroe calculator there. And I used to fool around with it. So I called over there and got an interview. A guy by the name of Hank Testa. And he hired me on the spot. So I stayed with Monroe Calculator for quite a few years. Became manager in Chicago, or at least acting manager. And then they transferred me to Toledo, Ohio. I was a branch manager there. And to Detroit, I was a branch manager there. And that's where I stayed till the company, because of the change in, there's not much of a demand for calculators anymore because of the computer age. And so when I left, I started up my own business, Standard Office Supply, and I sold office supplies, calculators in the house here. I had one big account, which was Kmart. I was selling Kmart. Yeah, calculators for about every store in their system. So it worked out pretty good.
And tell me how you met your wife.
I met my wife. I was going to the University of Wisconsin, and they used to have dances. You called the young adult club. It was, and I went there a couple of times, and I saw her. I'd seen her once before, and I asked her to dance, and she said yes. We danced, and I got her telephone number and called her and made a date, and then it just kept going.
And you were married and had a family,
Yeah.
had some children.
Yeah, we had 6 children, and my oldest son now unfortunately died because he became a drug addict. I don't know how, and finally caught up with him when he was 50 years old. And he couldn't recover. So it was sad, but all the other children are doing good. He had 2 children, so we got 20 grandchildren, and they're all doing well.
It seems like you got to a good place in your life.
I think so, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very much for sharing your story about your experiences in World War II, and also to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you very much.